Hey, this is Michael Lindsay, and today we're going to be talking about the 2021 CRF450R, RWE, and RX. I already did a video on basically what we used as a first look based off Geyser's bike a few months ago when the first MXGP World Championship rounds were getting ready to go down. And of course, before the whole COVID mess and the break of racing, we did see what we knew would be the precursor to the production version of this machine. We are now into bike intro season. I am lagging. This is the first bike 2021 production bike video I've done. I got to catch up. There's a Cowie and a Yamaha one I got to knock out tomorrow, but we're going to go ahead and start off with the red machines. Like I said, there's three to talk about today because Honda's dropping all the info here at 10 o'clock for the CRF450R, the Works Edition, and the update to the RX because they're all getting kind of the same slew of changes per se. So, of course, the last CRF450 ran a 4-year cycle, which is super common for Honda. They've been doing that the past 3 generations of bikes now, pretty much introduce the bike, tweak the bike the second year, do a mid-change the third year with a decent chunk updates, and then the fourth year they kind of BNG it and then come in with an all-new model. So we knew that this 450 was coming, and in the typical way that Honda does this, we will be another year out per se on the 250F. So this year it's just really all about the 450. Biggest things coming into this 2021 model: trying to get the weight down, trying to get the comfort, trying to take what is now the most out-of-the-box powerful 450 in the class and trying to make it a bit more overall rideable. So first things is, just staring at the bike, obvious head-to-toe changeover, all new bodywork, all new design structure. We have an all-new chassis that is both the mainframe, subframe, and swing arm are completely new. The mainframe, the spars are a little bit smaller. There's actually an extra ribbing inside, but they're trying to shrink down the overall spar size. They were able to dump a bit of weight out of the frame itself, almost 1.5 pounds. Big part of that is the spar design and then also the raised cradle on the bike. We'll get to what the raised cradle means here in just a minute. The swing arm itself has also changed, a little bit slimmer profile. They're working on improving the rigidity factor in it to increase what they consider the corner exit, both not only traction but actual comfort, how it rolls across the ground, how it flexes to the mainframe, and how it maintains a good constant traction feel while also not feeling flexy or like it bows or so rigid that it kind of kicks or drifts around on exit. The subframe is mostly designed to also try to trim weight to work with the new airbox design, going back to a single side muffler and working with all the new bodywork itself. Now, speaking of that raised cradle, that brings the other big change. This is the engine itself. We've seen this for many years with the KTMs. Of course, this was common in the 2-stroke era. KTMs held on their 4-stroke. Suzuki did it to their 250F 2 years ago. They're going to a center port exhaust, meaning the center spar coming out of the bottom, the head tube of the frame down, is no longer in the way of the exhaust port. Instead of the exhaust port having to come out to the right or left side of it, we've seen Honda come out the left side, down, around, and back, or the more traditional out the right side. You now have a straight shot out the center because the cradle's been raised and there's actually access for the head pipe to come out in between those cradles and then come back along the side of the motor. This also changes the exhaust port quite a bit. Naturally, it's a little bit easier to get that flow. You have even flow coming from both exhaust valves, and then the port itself is no longer round. It's an oval shape, which for a lot of people, for a lot of engineers, will increase the efficiency of that exhaust port itself. They're claiming a big part of this port design is to increase that power from more mid to high RPMs, say 5,000, 5,500 RPM and up is where most of the improvements here will be made. With that, we now have an exhaust system that comes out the center. They're able to get a little more head pipe length as exits down, around, and back, and then the dual exhausts are gone. Honda has gone back to a single side system. It's kind of the thing Honda's gone back and forth with a couple times over the years. The duals do give it, from theory, better centralized mass, or basically how you've balanced out the mass on the motorcycle for handling characteristic. It changes how the side plates feel on each side depending on how you taper the exhaust. Both sides feel consistent. But the bike has gone heavier since 09 up. It just keeps gaining weight. So going back to the single, they've been able to trim about 2.7 pounds off of it in the process. And also pretty much they're saying that the exhaust system design they've come up with for this bike, mostly in that head to mid pipe, is going to increase the rideability in low RPM to mid RPM. Because last year the Honda had a really good torquey character right off the bottom, But then right around that 4 to 5, kind of into the 5,000 RPM range, it almost had like a surge of power, kind of almost like a power band per se, like a two-stroke. There was a different taper in the power, and it was really hard, whether you're working, even with aftermarket ECUs, different engine development, to try to mellow out that change in RPM build. And that's what made our Honda a little bit hard to ride last year, is trying to get it to have more of a linear character. So between the Serampore exhaust, the different exhaust system, I think that was one of their big goals I've heard with this, is to try to keep the overall power output they have, keep it nice and high, keep the numbers good, keep that kind of stat as the most powerful in the class, but try to get the bike more rideable without just having to choke it down. Other things in the engine that have changed is the decompression system on the camshaft. It's always been on the other side away from the gear. That's always been just a little problem Honda's had over the years. I think since 09 on, certain years, the little mechanism, that whether it's the spring that retains it, sometimes pops out and the decompression pin decides to kind of go on a vacation somewhere else in the engine. They've changed it to more of a traditional design you see on other OEMs. They're now on the gear side. They've also gone ahead and changed the actual valve timing and the lift. Probably has a bit to do with the performance increase. Also looking for what changes with that new exhaust port itself. Their big one is Honda is known for, having the weak clutch. Well, there's two big things going on with the clutch here. They have decided to go hydraulic with this one, which was, to me, a little bit of a surprise. I heard in testing they'd been going back and forth with this model, whether they wanted to go hydro or not. I know, weight, cost, many other items play a factor in this, but they also wanted to bump the clutch up to an 8-plate stock. They also want to bump up the clutch pack pressure. It finally got to the point, cable clutch would have been a little bit uncomfortable, maybe a little stiff for the general, weekend rider. So they've gone ahead and gone hydraulic on the unit. Looks just like the unit we've been seeing on the Works bikes in the last couple years. The way it's routed into the case, it is made by Nissan. And they've gone ahead and bumped up that clutch. Like I said, the pack pressure is up. We are now from a 7 to an 8 plate. So hopefully out of the box should save people some money instead of, the usual racer mentality of, hey, I got to instantly go get a Hinson or a Recluse and throw it in this thing to get it to live. So it should help a lot of guys out of the box get lifespan and performance out of the clutch. And we are now, like I said, entering the hydraulic world with Honda. A couple other things with the engine that have changed. The airbox is quite a bit different. It's basically facing down. There should be a good little side view here in this presentation. Big one is the overall volume available. When you basically crack the throttles change, it went from 1.8 liters of air to 4.1. This is just right off the bottom RPM when you just snap the throttle on. Butterfly opens, engine wants air. It is a vacuum. Having that static availability of air should help it right off the bottom. It keeps it from feeling too lethargic as it tries to, as the engine brings up RPM and turns into a stronger vacuum and pulls air. It just has a little more available right from the crack of throttle already kind of sitting in there that doesn't already have to be pulled through the air filter element or into the airbox in general. The air filter is now a 1-bolt access to the side, a little bit easier to get to. The injector angle down past the actual butterfly has changed. It is still top mounted. They haven't gone to a undermount injector like we see some of the race team units go to, but they have changed the angle from 30 to 60 degrees. It's now spraying kind of more straight down in, which should. Their main thing is they're staying in the press info is it's improving the cooling of the air through the intake path. They also claim that the intake location for this bike, the air shouldn't heat up as much as the old bike, but also pointing that injector down, you've kind of changed the way that the fuel is sheared by the air, which could improve fuel atomization and improve the efficiency of that combustion itself once it finally enters through the intake valves and into the cylinder. The fuel pump has changed a bit. They've been able to reduce the size and keep what they consider the same performance and the same fuel pressure. This should allow for a little bit extra size in the fuel tank, or be able to get the same fuel tank overall volume or overall measurement with a slightly smaller tank. It also has reduced the weight of the fuel pump by 120 grams and removed from 6 bolts to 4 bolts to access it. Tweaking on the radiators a little bit for extra cooling. Also, kind of back over the chassis just real quick because I kind of missed something. Subframe design and mainframe design, overall loss of 2.2 or 2.3 pounds, 1.5, 4 pounds off the mainframe, 0.7 pounds off the subframe. New subframe unit's a lot more simplified than the old one structure-wise, the way it's built. Other points of the frame that have changed itself other than the raised cradle, the internal spar change, the overall diameter, and the cross ribbing in it is also the ribbing on the inside. Down by the foot peg and the swing arm region, the inside of the frame, the ribbing that they've done in there and support structure is a lot different. Big thing they're trying to do with the frame is reduce the lateral rigidity. A lot of companies the last couple of years, if you read their PR info, they're usually increasing the rigidity in different areas. Honda's been there already. They're trying to get more comfort. They're trying to keep that, reduce that lateral rigidity, which should kind of forward to aft flex on the bike would change. This should improve overall comfort, but I think one of the big things it should do is also make the bike quite a bit easier to set up suspension-wise. With it being so stiff laterally before, it put a lot of load front to rear. You kind of had to run the bike maybe a little stiffer to keep the balance. If you softened up the Honda, it would teeter-totter really easy because there would be so much pressure applied to each end. I think they've changed the lateral rigidity, they claim, by reduced it by almost 20%. That should make a fairly large difference in suspension setup based on how it's loading each end. I think just from reading that personally, it should make the bike a bit more compliant track to track. You shouldn't be making as many changes to the bike, so it should settle in better from changing conditions. It shouldn't feel like it's quite as hard to set up or like you're chasing the setup throughout the day as the track conditions change. The forks have gone to a 5mm longer stroke. This isn't too much of a surprise to me. This newest generation the Showa fork, both Cow and Honda, a lot of the settings you see people run are pretty much flush on the fork and the triple clamps right now. It gives you that extra 5mm tube lengths to play with the overall setting. They've also changed the valving itself, both front and rear. There's no note of a spring rate change. I've asked for it. I know there is a new style spring on the rear of the bike. They claim that between some small changes to the production of the shock plus the spring that they have lost almost half a pound right there. Mostly in the way they've designed the shock spring. It is still a steel shock spring and supposedly the same rate but a different design. Valving in the rear has changed, revised setting, larger main piston valving, and they have revised the link ratio on this bike. Also talking about that change in overall character, triple clamps, there's some lateral rigidity taken out there as well. They've kind of taken out some of the ribbing in the bottom to try to free up how those clamps flex. Geometry-wise, the bike is 1mm shorter on wheelbase. The rake is half a degree steeper. The trail has been reduced by 2mm. Swing arm angle has been increased by 9mm, and the ground clearance has been increased by 8mm. I did some measurements with the bike once. The Honda prior had the least amount of ground clearance by just a minor bit because of the linkage in the bottom of the frame placement by 5mm, so now it brings it up above some of the others. Couple other changes for weight. The clutch cable and throttle cable routings are like what we've seen on the KTM for a while. They go behind the handlebars, reduces the length that they have to go to get to their required locations, ends up saving a little bit of weight there. Redesigned fuel tank. The bodywork now is one big piece from the side panel to the radiator shroud. It's this one. It's pretty overall thin, but it is a one-piece item. But it requires quite a less amount of bolts. It's all 8mm to hold it on now, and you have pretty much 2 bolts on the main radiator shroud, one going mid through radiator shroud, which actually holds the seat on, and then one down in the rear, and that's all it takes to take those on and off. The seat. I like the seat design a lot. Before, you always slid the seat forward to clamp it in and then bolted it in at the rear. As you seat mounts and sit, the seat's always trying to slide back, flex those back mounts, and pop the front hooks out. So the seat always wants to come undone. The seat base gets flexed out. The mounts get flexed out. Now you actually put the seat on from the front going back, and it hooks into the subframe and the front of the fuel tank with clamps facing the opposite direction. The clamps are at the front of the seat. So now as you sit, seat bounce, and you're pushing into the seat, the clamps are actually holding it forward on the seat instead of the opposite where they wanted to slide out and basically come off the bike. Electronics, we still have the selectable torque control from last year. You still have your 3 engine modes, and you now have 3 launch control modes, and they're all built into one new little housing on the left side. Instead of having 2-3 buttons on the separate buttons on the left side, now it's built into one new housing with all the lights to tell you what they do and everything. And then of course your right side, you're still maintaining your start switch. Talking about the Works Edition by itself, kind of comes up with all the prior changes we've seen to last year's Works Edition. You've got the coating on the fork tubes, upper and lower. You have DID rims, a higher quality one. You have a Hinson clutch cover, a full Yoshimura exhaust system for this bike, all the HRC looks and goodies, a little bit different colored clamps. One of the real big changes this year that makes it a little more premium, twin air filter stock like the teams use for the HRC teams. And then a full Hinson clutch basket. It's not just the cover. They actually put a full Hinson clutch basket in this bike, which, of course, Hinson's been working with them through the development of this bike because of Geyser Racing in Europe, so they already have product ready. Yoshimura will be in the same boat. A lot of your HRC, people that work with them, the brands that work with them, their partners or sponsors will have products ready for this bike earlier than basically anybody. The RX pretty much gains all the same updates we have just spoken about, other than the usual things for the RX itself. Big one is they're claiming on the RX is with the new shape and structure. They've thinned down the width of their tank on the RX. It's basically all the same updates as are all the engine, swing arm, frame updates with an 18-inch rear wheel. It's going to have different mapping to make it smoother, different suspension settings, and the kickstand, of course. And that really about covers it. We've sent out for a couple other questions from Honda because there wasn't a lot of comments about the bottom end of the engine. Also nothing about the intake port. Waiting for an answer back on those because nothing in the PR info lists anything, or in the presentation they gave us yesterday lists if the intake port has changed to match any of the exhaust changes. The cases have clearly had to change. There's a oil sight glass on the right side, and the left side had to change to accept the hydraulic clutch, but there's no other comments if there's been any changes to the crank or the transmission. I personally don't think there has been. There could be, but info like that when we get in can post it out will be useful for people that have maybe parts on the last bike they're thinking about carrying it over, etc., etc. The other really big and odd news here at the end, you'll see a picture of the old bike versus the new bike because Honda's actually going to sell both of these motorcycles next year. They don't roll through the end of this year into next year. So the 2021 CRF450, they're hoping for availability in September. They're hoping for the Works Edition in November, and then the current CRF450 will carry over all the way through next year. I think you might see a little bit of limited availability on the new bike. So the old bike will be sold for another year as well at a $1,000 lower MSRP. So they've dropped the 2020 bike to $8,599. That's not like a rebate. That's actually going to be a listed price. They could rebate them further if there's still some sitting next year. But they're going to go ahead and do another run batch of those and sell those. The 21 CRF450 is going to be set at $9,599 MSRP, while the Works Edition takes a bigger bump up with a few more goodies on it this year at $12,380 MSRP. So hopefully if it's September for that launch, I would say probably in the next 2 to maybe about 2 months, we should hopefully get our hands on one of these things. Be able to go to the bike intro itself, test it out, and get a feel for it. If you guys have any questions, throw it in the comments section below. If I've missed anything or if you want me to further explain or ask some questions to see if I've dug up the info or anything, please let me know. I'll answer all the questions below. If you like what I do here, please give me a follow. We've been a little quiet on the channel last couple weeks as we've gone done with Supercross, but we're getting into bike testing season. This is my personal favorite time of the year, getting to go through all these bikes, test them, do shootouts, which I will be doing again this season. And thanks for watching.